Pasadena Police Chief Phillip Sanchez talks tonight with us here at CCN Crown City News about the officer-involved shooting that took the life of a teenager accused of robbery. It's a story that has gripped the country. We'll also hear from NAACP President Joe Brown in this special edition of CCN Crown City News. Your news, your neighborhood, seconds away.
You have a great business idea? The Pasadena Enterprise Zone can help. The Pasadena Enterprise Zone, open for business.
Hi, I'm Jesse Avila at the Convalescent Aid Society, a nonprofit organization established in 1923. We provide the free loan of durable medical equipment, of hospital beds, wheelchairs, walkers, canes, and many other items. Your donations and contributions are welcome and greatly appreciated. We are located at 3255 East Foothill Boulevard in Pasadena.
We're here to help you!
Please give us a call and check for availability at 626-793-1696.
Hi everyone, thank you for watching CCN Crown City News, your neighborhood. I'm Sunita Joshua Madison. We're bringing you a special edition of CCN tonight about the death of 19-year-old Kendrec McDade. The case caught national attention this past week, drawing comparisons to the killing of Trayvon Martin by neighborhood watchman George Zimmerman in Florida. But before we get into our special, we want to make sure you're prepared for the week ahead by checking in with CCN meteorologist Curtis Peak with your weather forecast. We had some light rains this weekend. Curtis, any chance of more?
Well, those light rains that we did have Saturday, I don't think they were expected. They just popped up. Now, as far as a chance of rain during this week, I think we are free and clear. I think we're going to see a low, a high, and another low. Let's take a look at our satellite radar right now. As you can see, we do have this ridge of high pressure that's sitting here over Southern California. But right here, this is that low I was telling you about that's going to come in after this ridge, this counterclockwise rotation. It is going to dip down, but I don't think we're not going to see any precipitation out of that. We're just going to get the tail ends of that. But what it is going to do is going to cool temperatures off by Wednesday and Thursday. It's going to be very cool down in the 60s by midweek, but by the weekend, we are going to see beautiful weather. And by next Monday, I'm telling you, we're going to be back up to about 84, 85 degrees. As we take a look at our headlines right now, we have a high pressure that's in control, as I said. We're going to have a warming through tomorrow, and we are going to see a cool midweek. Our high today was 79 degrees. Our low tonight is going to be 53 degrees. As you can see on our high and our low, we are above normal. Back in 1985, we saw 94 degrees. Back in 1982, our low was 33 degrees. Right now outside, we do have temperatures checking in at 73 degrees. We do have our winds out of 75 degrees. Our winds are out of the south at 5 miles per hour. Humidity, look how dry that is, 13%. Our sunrise tomorrow morning is going to be at 6:37, and our sunset tonight at 7:14. Let's take a look at our lows for tonight. We are going to see 53 degrees in Pasadena. Arcadia and Monrovia both are coming in at 51. Look at Glendale, 53 degrees, also just like Pasadena. Our highs for tomorrow, we are going to see 82. As I said, that ridge of high pressure is building. 80s across the board. That's what we're going to see. Now for our 7-day forecast. As I said, we are going to have this ridge of high pressure that's going to come in tomorrow, 81 degrees. And that low is going to come down by Wednesday and Thursday. Look at Thursday, 66 degrees. By Friday, that low, as quick as it came in, it's going to push back out. We are going to see a ridge of high pressure that's going to build back by this weekend. Saturday, 78 degrees. Sunday, 79 degrees. Look where we are Monday. We are in full effect high pressure with some offshore Santa Ana winds. So 84 by Monday. I know we have a special show tonight, so I'm going to send it back to you, Sunita.
Well, thanks, Curtis. Thanks for that beautiful weather that we have coming up. We look forward to it. Now back to our CCN special edition on the death of an unarmed teenager accused of robbery. 19-year-old Kendrec McDade's death reopened wounds in the community following the previous officer-involved shooting of Leroy Barnes several years ago. It also comes at a time when racial tensions run high in the nation over the death of another unarmed teenager, Trayvon Martin, in Florida. The story about McDade's death changed day by day, first from the suspects being armed to no gun ever being found, and then the alleged victim, Oscar Carrillo, who called 911, being arrested midweek for lying to police about ever seeing a gun. Pasadena Police Chief Phillip Sanchez met with members of the Pasadena community and the McDade family Saturday morning. CCN's Paulo Alejandro was there and joins us live with more on that. Hi, Paulo. Now, as we mentioned, the story has been changing day by day. Any more changes?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the DA has asked for additional time to review the information related to the involuntary manslaughter charges of Oscar Carrillo, the alleged armed robbery victim. Chief Sanchez's first stop Saturday morning was the New Revelation Missionary Baptist Church on Orange Grove. There he hosted a community meeting in which he shared facts and answered questions from the audience related to the death of Kendrec McDade. Afterward, he spoke to a crowd gathered at Jackie Robinson Park as part of the Cesar Chavez Peace Walk festivities, where again he answered more questions about the McDade shooting. I met Kendrec's uncle, Kevin McDade, at New Revelation Saturday morning. He invited me to his home to talk about a different side of his nephew than has been reported and offered a personal glimpse into the teenager's life.
Kevin McDade says he created this memorial in honor of his nephew, Kendrec Lavelle McDade, the 19-year-old former Azusa High School football standout who was shot and killed by Pasadena police officers late last Saturday night. In it, Kevin says, are pictures of the Kendrec his family and friends knew.
Kendrec was I say what you call a kindle spirit. You know, everybody that came around him got a little laugh out of him, like, because he was like a mystery dude. He might have a staring face, but when he opened his mouth and started talking to you, it was like the big soft giant.
McDade says his connection to Kendrec was closer to that of father and son. He says kids in the family looked up to him. McDade also says he was Kendrec's barber at times, and that the last time he cut his nephew's hair in this garage a couple of weeks ago would be the last time he would see the teenager.
He was getting a haircut, and I was telling him, man, like, you of age, you know, you could pay for your own haircuts, you know. Uncle not gonna cut your hair for free no more. Because he came in the garage, he didn't even ask me for a haircut. He just came and sat down and started brushing his hair. You know, he just came down and started brushing his hair. So me and my partners, he started spinning around with that look he got on his face, the smirk, you know. I said, all right, this your last one, man, for free.
In the days since the officer-involved shooting, police have said the alleged robbery victim, Oscar Carrillo, lied about Kendrec McDade and a 17-year-old suspect having guns. Investigators arrested Carrillo on involuntary manslaughter charges. Pasadena Police Chief Phillip Sanchez took questions about the shooting Saturday morning during a community meeting he hosted at New Revelation Missionary Baptist Church. Mayor Bill Bogard was there, and he addressed the concerns of some who said police haven't been releasing information to the public fast enough.
It isn't unusual for someone who has very strong feelings about a subject matter to feel that the information flow is not as fast as it should be. I feel that way. I have questions about this event. But I also know how the police work, how cautious they are in gathering the information, how long it takes to establish facts that are totally non-controvertible.
There'll be many stories, many rumors, some factual, some not, as we go through this journey together. But rest assured that the levels of investigation ensure transparency, it ensures openness, it reaffirms my philosophy and my commitment to you, the community we serve.
After the community meeting, Chief Sanchez appeared at the Cesar Chavez Peace Walk, where many held signs expressing support for McDade and contempt for Jeffrey Newland and Matthew Griffin, the officers involved in the shooting. We caught up with Chief Sanchez at Robinson Park, where he defended his department's policy of handling information.
Sometimes I can't get that information out as quickly as I would like to. Some media outlets and other people, they have the luxury of reporting on rumors and innuendos. I don't have that luxury. I'm guided by policy, I'm guided by procedure, I'm guided by the law.
As for Kevin McDade, he says any ill will toward the Pasadena police or Oscar Carrillo will do nothing to bring his nephew back. He says he hopes for justice and that a higher power will see him and his family through this difficult time.
My nephew was a chapter in my life that I will never forget, that I had a chance to read 19 years. You know, So now I'm finna turn the page. And the next, and after I keep reading, maybe the next chapter in my life will be justice for my nephew.
In our discussion, Kevin McDade said he wants people in the community to understand that his nephew's death was not a racial thing. Chief Sanchez said during his community meeting that this was not a law enforcement issue, but a community issue, and that members of the community need to take responsibility for the welfare of the young people in their care. Sunita, back to you.
Well, Paulo, it seems like there are constant changes in this story, so we'll check in with you to see what happens tomorrow.
Certainly.
And during the community meeting, Chief Sanchez played the 911 call Oscar Carrillo placed the night of the shooting. He also answered written questions from the audience covering topics such as proper police tactics and procedures in cases where officers perceive danger. We'll have that 911 recording for you in a little bit. But first, Chief Sanchez joins us today to address growing community concerns that the officers responding to the call use unnecessary force against an unarmed young black man. Obviously, this is a very sad situation that Kendrec McDade's family will carry with them forever. But it's also a difficult situation for the Pasadena Police Department. When something like this happens and there are many questions to be answered, facts to be gathered, facts which may take more time to get right than many are willing to give. So we appreciate the Chief making an effort to talk with us today, CCN. Thank you for being here, Chief.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as we just talked with Paulo, this story has been evolving from day one, and you've been making an effort to communicate with the community and stay on top of it. But you even heard Mayor Bogard say, you know, he wants the information faster, you know, he wishes it was coming out faster. Some are saying that, you know, it seems like the police have definitely been following with the news versus leading with it. For example, you know, you had done a re-interview with Oscar Carrillo on Monday regarding that 911 call and whether a gun was involved. And then you met with the parents and their lawyer on Wednesday morning at the offices of NAACP, but it wasn't until that afternoon that there was a press conference to announce there was an arrest. What do you say to people that the information should be coming out faster?
Well, I can appreciate the perspective, but first let me start by saying that this is an absolute tragedy for the McDade family, for Pasadena, for the police department, for the officers involved. Let me also offer my sincerest condolences to Mr. McDade and to Mrs. Slaughter, the parents of McDade, and suggest that you know, in time that the truth will be revealed. The reality is that information is consumed at a ferocious rate, not only in Pasadena but nationally as well. And as I had indicated Saturday morning with Paulo and some of the other field interviewers, that the Pasadena Police Department doesn't have the luxury of providing half-truths or myth-truths or partial information. Mm-hmm. That information has to be vetted, and then it has to be placed in the context, the continuum of information sharing. And so with respect to Mr. Carrillo, when he was first interviewed on Monday morning, that was a non-custodial interview. Remember, we just suspected at that point that there were inconsistencies. We just suspected there were partial truths in his initial statement. And really a lot of credit goes to a very talented investigative team who had the courage to bring that forward and say, wait a minute, something seemed incongruent here. They seem odd. And now we have a responsibility to the McDade family, a responsibility to our community at large, a responsibility to the judicial process to start to vet that information. But it all takes time. Things don't happen in police investigations in a compressed format very often. Typically they take a very long time to vet that information, to recheck and reprocess the information, and then ultimately to release it.
Now, you know, the attorney Harper for the McDade family, though, you know, I think she was, I don't know exactly what the conversation was that Wednesday morning before your press conference announcing the arrest, but it doesn't seem like that information was shared that, you know, we are going to be having a press conference right after we meet here, and this is, you know, this is what might be involved here. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like from, you know, just reports I've read that took them by surprise. Mm-hmm. Is that something that was shared with them?
Actually, there's a little bit of a timeline. We have to go backwards a little bit. I did meet early on with the family, Mr. McDade and Mrs. Slaughter, over at the NAACP, and Mrs. Harper was there as well. And during that initial conversation with them, it was actually the second time I met with them. I met with them during the evening of the incident at one of our local area hospitals to explain the process and where we'd be going from the incident. But at that meeting at the NAACP, at the Pasadena branch, I gave them a firm commitment that if there was a turn in the investigation, if there was new information, that they would hear that from me personally. Okay. Later on, the next day or so, then we made an arrest. That afternoon, actually, I called Mrs. Harper so that I could talk with Mr. McDade and Mrs. Slaughter to fulfill my personal obligation to them, that I would share personally information with them. I wasn't able to actually meet with Mr. McDade or with Mrs. Slaughter. I had to convey that information through Ms. Harper, which I respect completely. She represents the family. She's their counsel. She's interested in their welfare as well. So I was comfortable sharing that information with Ms. Harper. And then ultimately we went on with a press conference shortly thereafter. So the time frame wasn't as elongated as some people might perceive it was. It actually was very condensed from the time that Mr. Carrillo was arrested to the time I communicated with Ms. Harper to ultimately the time that the press conference was held.
Okay. Well, I have a lot more questions to really talk about the day of this incident and find out more. We're going to come back in a few minutes. Up next, we'll have more with the Chief Sanchez when we return. And later in the show, we'll also talk with the president of the NAACP, Joe Brown. Don't go away. You're watching CCN Crown City News. Your news, your neighborhood.
G-morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me back. Hey, did you tell your parents about us? Let's skip first period together. Did you get all my texts? Is practice over yet? Where are you at? Are you with your friends? That's L-A-A-A-A-M-M-E-E-E. Capital X, lowercase o, capital X, lowercase o. I love you. JK. I hate you. JK. Are you ignoring me? We're in a huge fight right now. Is this something I did? I can see your lights on. I'm coming over. This isn't a joke. What'd you dream about? Me? I'm lonely. Holla back. Holla back. Let's try something new. Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.
My joints ache so bad, I wake up in pain every day. I want to know why. I want to know why my hair is falling out. How did this happen?
How did this happen? A little pain in my knee. That's how it started.
That's how it started. This rash on my face, now it's like my body is attacking me. I want answers.
When you don't have the right answers, it may be time to ask your doctor the right question.
Could I have lupus?
Do you have a great business idea? The Pasadena Enterprise Zone can help. The Pasadena Enterprise Zone, open for business.
We're back with Chief Sanchez talking with us about the officer-involved shooting of Kendrec McDade. Chief, I want to play the 911 call made from Oscar Carrillo that night. Let's hear that quickly.
911 reporting. Hey, man, you guys just stole my backpack and put a gun on my face right now? Which one has the gun? Hello? One of them, they just pointed me right now. Okay, the one that was going on Raymond or the one that went on Orange Grove? The one was going on Raymond. Do you remember, and they were both wearing black sweaters? Yeah. Do you remember anything about the gun? Both have a gun, man. They both the gun and run away from me. So both had a gun? Yes, I know. Both they have a gun.
Well, Chief, You know, one of the things that really doesn't, going back to the community meeting that you had on Saturday, we're going to come back to this 911 call, but one of the things that really doesn't sit well with people is that, you know, officers said that they were at heightened level because, you know, they were told through this 911 caller that there was a gun involved, but, you know, there was no police sirens involved or anything. The main thing with that, they didn't activate any of the cameras in the patrol cars, and that doesn't sit well with the community. You know, in one sense, they're coming with a heightened sense of alert, and then on the other hand, it's just another situation, you know, attempted robbery, but, you know, nothing to activate. I think it's called Code 3, where they activate the cameras.
So let me put that a little bit into context. Code 3 responses are typically highly scrutinized and highly supervised, in part because of the liability that's associated with traveling oftentimes beyond the speed limit with lights and sirens to warn passersby, to warn motorists, to warn pedestrians that the police are in an emergency response. In 2011, we had about 175 robberies. 53 of those were armed. And of the 53, 37 times officers either initiated a red light and siren response, they were directed to a role in that capacity either by a supervisor or by the dispatch center. In this particular case, the uniformed officers driving a marked passenger vehicle were just east of the location when the call came out. So while I'm speculating a little bit, one of the considerations could clearly be that red lights and sirens might warn the person who just committed a crime.
But, you know, I think the main concern isn't necessarily just the sirens, it's the camera, because if we had the camera, we would have a better understanding of what happened at that time.
Right, so the camera, the onboard video camera, is activated by Code 3 lights and siren. It also has a manual button that the officers can reach over and push. By the time the officers actually got to Fair Oaks and Orange Grove, recognized that they had already seen Mr. Carrillo's car, they had seen Mr. McDade, and now they're actively engaged in a chase. And so ultimately that chase leads to Sunset Avenue, and we know what occurred following that incident. All that will come under review. It will come under review internally by the Pasadena Police Department. It will come under review externally by an independent review of the Office of Independent Review
Whether
Group.
They should or shouldn't have put that camera on.
And how that could have occurred. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, we do have a few more tapes that we want to play of individuals at that meeting and what they had to say. So we'll go to that and come back to you in a minute.
I would love for him to say that it's time for a change in the way that we police our communities and the way that we use deadly force, especially against, you know, young people, and that it's not a green light because somebody called in a crime, that it's expected that the police are allowed to shoot or open fire on young people.
I feel like I can relate because being pulled over, being in situations being pulled over, I know that definitely it's just like real defensive. I have to be very careful.
Fundamentally, this is about a use of force, an excessive use of force to kill an unarmed, innocent person. By all measures so far, he's innocent. And it's just, it's really appalling.
They want to put a color barrier between us. My nephew went to school with all Hispanics. So it's no racial profiling or anything like that. There's no bias towards, you know, Hispanics or if the caller was Hispanic or anything like that. I want y'all to understand that this was the officers that shot my nephew that was running away from them, you know. So that's what it all boiled down to. So when the chief want to say these were tactical moves, shooting out the police car, come on, man. I mean, that's a drive-by. That's a drive-by.
What do you say to people who, you know, they're saying that the 911 caller, the dispatcher, how do they express the nuances of that call coming in, where, you know, they're hearing 1 minute from the caller that, you know, he's not really mentioning a gun, then he's definitely mentioning a gun, then he's saying there's 2 guns. How does the dispatcher get that information over to the officers?
Well, we use a dispatch system called a CAD, computer-aided dispatch system, and as the operator talks with Mr. Carrillo, he or she is then keystroking information, which is automatically transferred to the dispatcher, who then in turn shares that information with the responding units, providing updated information as that occurs. And that was the case in this situation as well. The entire time, law enforcement officers are receiving an updated information about direction of travel, about clothing description, about the description of the gun, if that's provided as well. All that information is real time to the officers as it's being shared by Mr. Carrillo.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, one of the other controversies with the police department right now is the encryption of the radio scanners. And so, you know, that's one of the things the community is saying, you know, we don't know exactly what was being told to these officers. You know, do we know that they are coming with, you know, on all alert or not? And what do you say about that encryption system, that, you know, shouldn't others be able to, you know, analyze the police and have more transparency?
Absolutely. Radio encryption itself was a program that we looked at about 7 years ago is when it started to take form and how we ultimately would implement that. At that time, we were really trying to be compliant with some of the federal guidelines relating to digital transmissions. And we are working on that as well, so that we can ensure that other people can hear what the Pasadena Police Department is doing with the initial broadcast.
Okay. Well, I wanted to go back to a little bit about what those people were saying on tape, and just, you know, changes that are going on in our culture. And I wanted to talk about wardrobe, actually. You know, even in the Trayvon Martin case, you know, Geraldo Rivera talked about the hoodies, and maybe that negatively influenced George Zimmerman, you know, in the decision he made that night. You know, in these situations, you know, a lot of young men these days are, you know, they have the baggy pants on that, you know, are down to their waist. So a lot of times, you know, if they're going for their waist, it might be to pull up their pants versus pull out a gun. How is the police, you know, kind of changing their tactics to be able to adjust to what's going on in society?
Well, first and foremost, I think really that the use of lethal force really is guided by the highest courts in America. Tennessee, Gardner, and Graham, those kinds of case laws set a precedence about how officers are held accountable for their actions and what they do with respect to the application of force. That law is also supported then by rules, policies, and local statutes as well that again dictate how the officers are going to react, when they can use lethal force, when they can't, and then of course that is going to be scrutinized as well. With respect to society and what we're seeing right now, it's a difficult situation. Imagine, if you will, if you're a law enforcement officer, if I asked you to describe somebody that was up to illegal activity and you gave me a description that included a hoodie, I could give you a description of a person that attended Caltech or any of our great learning institutions that might dress the same way. And so we're not looking necessarily at the mode of dress. We're really looking at the activity itself. And what is the activity that necessarily adds to a concern about illegal activity or concerns about an officer's safety? The reality is that officers deal in a world of possibilities, and that's tempered by probability, but there is at least a heightened concern when you introduce knowledge from an independent party that there is at least a handgun that's involved in the McDade shooting. The reality is that the officers at least had an understanding from Mr. Carrillo that there was not only one gun, but at point by his own testimony, 2 guns that are involved in this. Mm-hmm. And so while that's not a defining factor necessarily, it clearly adds to the officer's state of mind.
Now, could they have used other tactics to apprehend him versus, you know, making the initial call to shoot?
Well, I think the investigation ultimately will tell us that. I think that when we have multiple layers, and I think this is critical for the viewing audience, we have multiple layers of independent review by the Pasadena Police Department for its administrative and internal affairs process, by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Department that will tell us about wound injuries and those kinds of things, and toxology, by the OIS team from the District Attorney's Office that will look at legality, by the Office of Independent Review that will take a look at a comprehensive review of what did the officers do, what led up to the shooting, what were the tactics and the protocols and the policies followed during that incident.
because there's certainly a difference between going to jail for a potential crime and being dead. And what if, Kendrec McDade had, the reports are that he had turned towards the officer. What if at that point he was turning to stop, to stop running, to give up potentially? How is that call made?
Right, and that's an ominous decision that the officer has. I think that there's a profound question wrapped in there. Did Mr. McDade have the opportunity to stop when he was at Orange Grove and Sunset? Did Mr. McDade have the opportunity to stop any time prior to the shots being fired? I think that's a question as well. There was one question in the community meeting that was characterized as a drive-by shooting. Nothing could be further than the truth. Drive-by shootings typically are perpetrated by cowards. By people who are in a car and without concern or focus fire shots randomly at anybody. And those we've seen the devastating effects of those kinds of things. This was a professional law enforcement officer that was involved in a critical incident, and because he fired by the car, it is a mischaracterization of the facts to indicate that it's a drive-by shooting.
Okay. Now, some are asking about the officers involved in this shooting. They're listed as victims on the police report. They're saying that these two officers are Iraq War veterans, and they're wondering what kind of psychological tests have they been given, that to know that they aren't suffering from any kind of PTSD or that kind of thing.
Well, initially when they're hired, they go through a complete background process, as I think our community well knows. And as part of that process, there is a psychological review, a profile of that officer. And both of these officers, they passed through that successfully. They passed through the academy. They were hired and subsequently deployed in the field as passing police officers. Whenever there's a military deployment, there's that decompression time frame where the military brings back the armed serviceman who has been serving in the military, and they go through that decompression state as well. Typically, we look at law enforcement behavior with certain categories about misbehavior or misconduct. These officers weren't engaged in that kind of behavior. While I can't go into their personnel package, I think it's important for the viewing audience to know that these were officers that didn't engage in those kinds of situations that would generate complaints.
Okay, yeah, so what their history was, one didn't have a history of shooting, officer-involved shooting, and one was involved with a officer-involved shooting with a Rottweiler, correct?
And that's absolutely critical for our viewing audience to understand. One officer had 0 shootings in his past, and the other did, in fact, shoot a Rottweiler that is attacking one of our community members and attacking apparently his domestic pet.
Okay. Now, I think the community is still, kind of healing from, we'd mentioned the Leroy Brown incident from a few years ago. It was right before you had arrived. What kind of changes did the force go through that you might have been able to see as you came on?
Well, I looked at the Mr. Barnes shooting extensively as part of the hiring process. I wanted to make sure that I had a full breadth of what had occurred, at least from the documentation and moving in towards the testing process for the chief of police in Pasadena. My sense is there was a comprehensive independent review by the same group that I reached out to Monday night, Mr. Michael Giannacco. I left a voicemail message for Mr. Giannacco inviting him into this investigation. Now that was prompted by my own desire for an independent review, not by community clamor or by concern. And I think that that's important for our viewers to know. That I wanted that openness, I wanted that transparency. And if a third-party group brought that to the table, then we should be able to embrace that. I think there were a series of changes and recommendations that were first and foremost in my mind. In fact, we had a copy of the Office of Independent Review description and recommendations at the shooting of Mr. McDade, so we could ensure that we were following the mandates, to include notifying the media very early in the morning.
Okay. Now, do you predict with this shooting, I mean, obviously you're still going through the process, do you predict there will be any changes? Do you think that there are situations that you're maybe already seeing that you think, okay, well, going forward we might be able to do some things differently?
Well, I don't want to predict. I think because we have an ongoing investigation, that probably would be an injustice to the McDade family, to Mr. Slaughter and to Mrs. Slaughter and to Mr. McDade. To the men that were involved in the incident, and to our community. But what I'd like to say is this, is that Pasadena has reviewed its policies and procedures. We have contemporary training models that require cognitive processing and decision making by officers. Every time that they take their firearm out of their holster in a training environment, they don't shoot a bullet, which is important because the reality is that when that occurs in real life, in the field, in their daily discharge of their duties, every time that they take their firearm out of their holster, they don't use it as well. They don't fire that weapon. So it's a review of the law. It's a review of contemporary policies. It's a review to ensure that we are consistently and continuously assessing those. Some other important topics, I think, as well. The Pasadena Police Department works hard its relationship with its community. We build our relationships on trust and respect. And I think in part that we have really built a great relationship with our community, with people of color, with other people in our community. We are one community. We're not segments of a community. We're not a particular geographic location, independent or isolated from any other part of Pasadena. We are a total community. And in that regard, I think that it is helpful to build those kinds of relationships on trust and respect, to teach our young people about how to engage law enforcement and teach our law enforcement officers how to engage our young people, and to a greater extent to monitor the kind of activity that our people behind, our young people behind.
Do you think there's a lot to be learned on both sides from that?
Absolutely. And I think that the reality is who's our greatest teacher? We might argue that our greatest teacher are our parents, and they can't abdicate that responsibility, not to the church or the clergy, even though they do a great job, not to mentors or to the school. They do a great job. But first and foremost, we have to be responsible for our young people. I said Saturday, and I absolutely believe we're the adults. We are the adults. We have the opportunity to change an environment so our young people have a likelihood or at least an increased chance for success. Don't they all want the dream? They don't wake up one day after receiving life from their birth mother, and they don't say, "Well, I hope to grow up and be a robber someday," or "I hope to be a pedophile or a child molester." That's not in their train of thought. They really want success and they want the opportunity.
Well, I think that's what is so hard with this situation here. By all accounts, you have someone who, was a star athlete, football athlete, was a pretty good kid from what you hear in the community. Now, obviously, there's allegations that he committed a robbery that evening. And I did want to ask you, are there surveillance tapes on that?
Yes, there are videotapes from a security system at the Mexican food restaurant and the taco wagon where the burglary and larceny initially occurred.
And will those tapes be released?
Ultimately, in the investigative process, I suspect they will be.
Okay. And I read reports, too, that there were other potential robberies. Do you have any kind of information on those?
I don't. And I don't want to speculate about what anybody was involved in that evening. I think that we are focused on this very horrific, this very tragic event, and really what are the facts surrounding it.
And that's the tragedy here, is that obviously, maybe this kid made a mistake. He was running away from it. He stopped, tries to decide, okay, I'm done running. And, a tragedy like this occurs. And so how can we stop these kinds of things from happening?
It's an educational process. I absolutely believe that. It's a village approach. It's parents, it's school, it's the police. We have a program with our Young Explorer Scouts. We have over 42 young explorers that are the vast majority of those young people are minority, people of color. Here in Pasadena, African American, Latino, those kinds of things as well that are engaged. And my expectation is they're not going to grow up to be police officers. I want them to grow up to be lawyers and doctors and newscasters and those other kinds of things that work for a nonprofit. But if they choose to be a police officer, that's fine and well. What we're trying to give them is sound decision-making skills so that they can assess for themselves. They can be an individual and not succumb to peer pressure or some other kind of social pressure from Facebook or some of these other social medias that they feel like they've got to be part of the in crowd, whatever that might mean.
Well, there's a lot of work to be done in this community, and like you said, on both sides. Police understanding the kids out there and their, mentality, which may have changed over the years, and and the kids also understanding how to react to police officers, work with police officers, not just view them as only a threat. So I think there is a lot of work to be done in this community, but I do appreciate you coming on and talking and being open in taking these questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, next we'll talk to the president of the NAACP, Joe Brown, who's been keeping pressure on the police on behalf of the McDade family. You'll want to hear what he has to say. You're watching CCN Crown City News. Your news, your neighborhood.
hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
Okay, when I give you the signal, you two cut left to the flag. I'm gonna cover you from that tree over there. Remember, don't go for the flag unless you know the coast is clear, okay?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent, because kids in foster care don't need perfection. They need you.
What if a disaster strikes without warning? What if life as you know it has completely turned on its head? What if everything familiar becomes anything but? Before a disaster turns your family's world upside down, it's up to you to be ready. Get a kit, make a plan, be informed today. Learn how at ready.gov.
Be free. Nice, Dad. Nice, Dad. Nice, Dad.
Charles!
Nice, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
So far, the only time Kendrec McDade's parents have spoken out was with their attorney at the offices of the local NAACP earlier this past week. NAACP President Joe Brown has been in close contact with the McDade family since the shooting. He joins us live today, but before we start, let's hear some more from the people who were at that community meeting on Saturday.
I don't think that represents all the Pasadena Police Department, but I have had encounters with the Pasadena Police Department, South Pasadena Police Department, and it's just really disappointing that these are the people who are in charge.
Their claims of him grabbing for his waistband was justification to, punch bullets into a teenager's chest and body is completely disgusting and absurd. That's something that is even written off with such, blatant disregard for human life, especially within the community.
Let me be very clear on this. There was a crime that occurred at Summit and Orange Grove. That crime, there were 2 counts of burglary and there was a count of grand theft and failure to report as a gang member were filed against the minor. There was a physical theft, grand theft that occurred of personal property of Mr. Carrillo. That's not disputed. What's in question was Mr. Carrillo's lie, fabricating the information about the firearm.
Did you ever find out why? Did he ever explain his reasoning for adding the information about the firearm?
Yeah, he wanted to hasten a police response.
That's what he said?
That's what he said.
Now, I'm sure it was hard for you to hear of the death of Kendrec McDade. What went through your head when you heard about it, and when did you start suspecting that things weren't adding up?
Well, first reaction is always not again. As you know, each time I've appeared here has been when there's been an officer-involved shooting or use of lethal force. We had this same discussion right here at this at this TV station about 2.5 years with Leroy Barnes. Previous to that, we had it with Maurice Clark. Previous to that, we had it with Lamont Robinson. So when you first get this type of information, is here we go again. And it causes this community sometimes to look in awe and say, something must be wrong. And I have never wanted to echo those sentiments until now. And when you hear about the tragedy that happened to Mr. McDade, certainly has caused me to say, we really need to go back and look at policy, procedure to ensure that something must not be going according to what has been laid out in the Pasadena Police Department's manuals.
Now, obviously, there's a balance here. I mean, you're asking, I suppose, the police to maybe have more of a hesitation when they're out in the field and in these types of situations. But what if if they take the hesitation before the shot, it leads to more officers being shot? Is that is that equal?
Well,
or
certainly it has to be a good balance.
Mm-hmm.
We don't seem to have a lot of bones to pick with the police department. It's just that oftentimes officers arrive up on the scene not with the intent to investigate or take a second to rethink, but then just to go in with guns blazing. That's what we continue to hear in this community, even after the meeting on this past Saturday. The community is saying even today, yes, a meeting occurred. Certainly information was shared, but nevertheless, tension is still heightened in this community. And we don't know how we can get a handle on this thing in order to be able to sit down with the chief and some of his staff to have a good discussion on what we need to do.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, I think from the Leroy Barnes incident, the request was share information, talk to us more. Now I think the chief is taking that to heart and is trying to, meet with people like you're saying, yeah. But that's not it. So what do you think is the next thing that is really going to help, bring these tensions down?
I'm glad you raised that. We use a four-pronged approach to these things. Number one is transparency. Certainly the chief has been a little more transparent than previous chiefs have been. There is one question that still remains or lurks in the minds of the community. Is all of that information really being shared? Truly, and it's unfortunate that the caller made a bogus report. So now we get to the second level, and that's one of accountability. The young man who's in custody that was with Mr. McDade, he's in custody as a minor. The gentleman who made the bogus call, he is being held accountable and is in custody. So that only leaves two other pieces of this process. And so the community continues to ask, well, what is going to happen when an officer is fired? And hopefully it has been according to policy, but if it had not been according to policy, where you shoot from a vehicle. The third level of this approach has been one of youth involvement. We regret that during the short period of time I was there on Saturday, there were very, very few youth who were there. The youth in this community, it happened over at the Blair School. It has happened in many other locales in this community. Don't forget to include us in some of the discussions that we need to have with the chief of police.
So how aren't they being included? I mean, you obviously recognize there's a problem there that the youth aren't being included. You're there. How, are you saying it's only the police's job to get the youth there to be involved? What's about?
What we are hoping to accomplish probably around the 12th of April. We want to allow young people in the community to come together on some type of a visual just to share and get some of this hostility off of their chest, at which time when we begin to sit down and share with the chief and some of the other elected officials. These are some of the things that may work. These are some of the things that you've already implemented, but they have not worked long term. Sometimes when these incidents happen, we don't want to stand before the community and just take it on the chin. I'm one who doesn't like a lot of that, but that is what will help move the community a little bit forward so persons will know you did have a chance to hear what I was saying, even if it's incorrect, even if it's improper.
So was that the hard thing with the community meeting? I had heard that, it was very orderly as far as, people wrote their questions on note cards and were able to submit them. So, obviously the chief was able to probably take more questions, answer more questions quickly. But did that take away from the venting that they really needed? That was part of the process.
100% correct on that. Many in the community, and I've heard this all day, that it was more scripted. Some of the persons felt that the questions that I may have had was never vetted, never discussed. Although the chief did the best job that he possibly could. But at some point, Chief Sanchez, myself, and the rest of us who are here in this community is going to have to stand before the community and allow people to vent and discharge their frustration on us.
But now, will they only be satisfied, community members, if the police officers are either sanctioned, fired? Is that the only thing that will be satisfactory?
I really don't know what the final outcome or disposition is going to be. We do know that due diligence, we hope, will be discharged in this manner. But the community is asking for equal amount of accountability as it relates to the police officers. And if policy is the way the chief said, I'm sure we'll be able to get a copy of that so that we can share with the community stakeholders this is what the policy says. And this just didn't come up last week or out of the clear blue sky after this incident.
Now, part of that is, are you talking about the officers being listed as victims on the police report?
Not that as much as it is the shooting from a moving vehicle.
Okay.
I don't know how you want to categorize it. Some in the community say it was a drive-by. I certainly don't subscribe to that. But is that policy that officer can shoot from his moving vehicle? And if so, just share us where that policy and that procedure is. And if that's a new policy and procedure, we realize that certainly years ago we did have a use of force board. They would meet monthly. They would prepare reports. The community stakeholders would be privy to those reports. They would make recommendations to the chief as was defined in the guidelines. We are not so much concerned with police tactics. No one in this community is. But they do want to have some idea on the equipment as well as some of those things that will keep these things from continuing to occur.
Now, obviously, at some point, you should be able to find out if that is a normal tactic or not, the, shooting from the vehicle.
Right.
It would seem that if an officer doesn't have enough time to exit a vehicle to, handle a situation, doesn't it seem likely that that would be a tactic that they could employ?
I'm certain that it will be, but it has to be written. It just can't come up every time there is a officer-involved shooting.
Mm-hmm.
We change a policy to fit what has already occurred.
But now, should officers have to reveal all of their tactics? Is that something that...
That's no secret. If you're going to shoot from a prone position or standing position or whatever the position, we're not asking you to reveal the tactics as much as is that according to policy, procedure, and guidelines. Mm-hmm. And if it is, then that's another issue that some of the stakeholders may want to share with their elected officials to make sure that it's reviewed so that persons have a great understanding that, yes, they can do it.
Okay.
Those things just came up certainly over the last day or so.
Well, this is obviously an unusual case in so many ways with the, just even going to the 911 caller, now being arrested. Looking at the, obviously the nation at this point is, there's a lot of tension all around the country. Do you see similarities with this case and the Trayvon Martin case?
They're similar, but then there are some dissimilarities. In the state of Florida, Mr. Zimmerman had the law on his side to do that. In this particular case, of course, unfortunate shooting occurred, and police officers had the law on their side. Regrettably, both of these persons were African Americans.
And unarmed.
Yes, and unarmed. But the bigger picture here is that I'm sure some legislative action is going to be seriously reviewed, not only in the state of Florida, but in New York as well as here in California. Certainly, we've got persons all over the country who are just biting at the teeth to come to Pasadena. We have tried to rebuff all of those type of things. That's why we wanted calm to prevail before we would go back to sit down with some of the community stakeholders and allow them to vent on us, to tell us, you give us some idea on how you want us to move forward with this. But we have to do those type of things now because things will get out of hand. Not only here in this city, but now you're looking at another issue that will come up.
Well, obviously, we're coming on the anniversary of the riots here in Los Angeles. And do you think these things are building to anything like that, or is there too much work happening on all ends to prevent that?
I don't envision that happening. We just know that because it's happening so many places with young African American males. A heightened sense of tension has begun to rise, particularly among our young people. And this is no regard to diversity or ethnicity. If you notice in the march on Saturday, there was just as many Latinos who were participating, who were calling out that we need to take a good look at some of the use of force policies and procedures as there were African Americans. Mm-hmm. So young people all over the country are having an uprising, but this is a world problem here. And so that's why we have to kind of get some containment on what we can recommend to the community stakeholders, not excluding the young people.
Absolutely. Like you're saying, you need them to be involved and engaged in the community. That's, often what we're saying is that they're not engaged enough, but then, they have so much energy, so you got to figure out how to channel it in the right direction. Now, have you had contact with the 17-year-old? I know, obviously he's a minor. We're not, putting his name out there, but are you in contact with him or his family?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and has he said anything to you about, you know, what happened that night, or, you know, what he thought when he heard Kendrec was dead?
I won't share that part of it. The police have interviewed him upward of 22, 24 hours, and so whatever he said to them and whatever he said to us, that's something that the attorneys will be dealing with. But much of this we've been privy to hear about even since last Tuesday morning. And so these things that just rolled out on Wednesday and Thursday, we were already well informed of what had occurred on these matters.
Okay. Now, you know, going back to the 911 caller, you know, obviously at this point he's been arrested. We were still trying to find out if charges will be filed. Just found out today that the DA is saying that they need more information. Not quite sure what more information they're looking for. But, you know, what do you say that, you know, there's reports out there that he, you know, is not here legally. Does that influence this case at all?
I don't think it does. I certainly would hope, for the sake of this community, as we go forward with this thing, there is some action that is taken by the district attorney. There is no misunderstanding with African Americans and the brown community. We don't want that to even be perceived. A good working relationship have occurred, and we're building on that, and it continues to occur. But if something like this occurs, when one young man is deceased, another young man is in custody, but another young man who led to the fatal shooting of this young man walks free, that would be a travesty.
Okay. And, you know, going back to, you know, even the Trayvon Martin case and just, you know, the support that has been given to his family and, you know, all of the protests that have gone on in the country. And some critics are saying that, you know, the African-American community are rightly, you know, vocal on these situations with Trayvon and you know, situation with Kendrec. But when there's, you know, black-on-black violence, then, you know, where's the voice on that, on trying to, you know, make some changes there?
We certainly have, from the NAACP standpoint, in the city of Chicago, Illinois, we strongly come out against violence is violence to this organization. And we're just as vocal as when there's black on black. We just simply don't know how to get a good grasp on some of these things to try to reverse the tide on all of the killings. But regrettably, when there's an officer-involved shooting, that raises to a different height because we're looking at trained professionals. That does not excuse what happens when there's teenage black-on-black crime. But nevertheless, it's still another dead youngster. But when you start looking at officers who our tax dollars go to make sure that he or she is adequately trained and who can discharge a firearm, not even just pulling the handgun and letting go. But sometimes we have a bigger question when everything appears to always be on automatic. One shot, I don't know whether he had 9mm or whether he was using another service revolver. But one squeeze of the trigger, and you're looking at 8, 9 shots going already. The other thing that we'll be looking at very, very carefully in this matter is, once again, getting back to policy, because those are the only things that we sit down and share with Chief Sanchez. Is it policy for one officer to shoot in one direction, and if the vehicle is moving, how is he going to ensure that he didn't hit his own officer, who was his own partner? Is that policy? And so we'll be quite a stickler on this, not being adversarial, but being an advocate to ensure that wherever those adjustments need to be made, we need to go and make those adjustments.
Okay. Well, you know, obviously, you know, you want to hold the police accountable in this situation and make sure, you know, whatever, you know, they determine is the result, you know, at least that they're being transparent and putting the information out. How much blame do you put on the 911 caller for saying that there was a gun?
Well, that's quite a bit of blame to be placed on that. What the community is calling for and what we've looked at even today, very little information has been shared beyond that. Certainly as quick as it has been to put the 911 caller out there, and rightfully so. Okay. But no information has gone forward even after the gentleman who shot the young man when they called the paramedics. What was the response time? And so there's a lot of factors we'll be looking at.
Well, we certainly will be looking at it. There's obviously going to be so much information coming on. This story has been changing day by day. I want to thank you so much for coming on our show and talking about these and being an advocate for the families. That's it for this newscast. Thanks to Pasadena Police Chief Phillip Sanchez for sitting down with us to answer more questions about the officer-involved shooting. We also want to thank NAACP President Joe Brown for being here. Thanks to all of our sponsors, including Southern California Edison, Wink Marketing, and the Pasadena Enterprise Center office building with available space. Thanks also to the CCN crew. They make this show possible. But finally, we thank you for watching CCN Crown City News. Join us each week as we cover the news in Pasadena and the San Gabriel Valley. For all of us here at CCN, I'm Sunita Joshua Madison. Have a great week.